Commission workshop for March 12th at 1 p.m. Commissioners present are Commissioners David, Stearns, Hanson, Malloy, Rose, and Levine. Commissioner Van Dyke is absent. First agenda item is the minutes approval. Hope everybody had a chance to look at the minutes. Anybody have any changes? Edits? Okay, anybody want to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Stearns made a motion to approve the minutes. Anybody have a second? Commissioner Hanson has seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, it passes. All right, today we're here really to talk about one of the first agenda items is the Reentry Center draft code amendment. And as we discussed last time, our goal is really just to focus on the land use code amendment, not the broader issue of whether a reentry center is actually a good idea or a bad idea. We also have been asked by the county commissioners to develop this code with some criteria that they could use to evaluate any potential applications that the county should receive. So really, it's a code-driven discussion on that. Does anybody have any questions about that? Everybody understand it? Good. What we're going to start out with is, last time we were discussing this topic, we asked community development to go back and try to do some background on what the other reentry centers are about, how long they've been there, and whatever else. We had a list of ideas, and we summarized it. Commissioner Hanson summarized it. And I'm just going to turn it over to Amy and Mary, and let them go and walk us through the PowerPoint presentation that is there. And you should have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation in your deck over here. So Amy?
Sure, thank you, Chairman. So just the information I got this from was from the Idaho Department of Corrections, and also tried to dig into each of the existing 4 centers in Idaho. So this was taken from the Department of Corrections. Essentially, they say they serve 2 purposes. They've just prepare inmates for release and try and have them close to family, and also protect the community from those who haven't been released yet. The 4 centers in Idaho are the East Boise Community Reentry Center, Idaho Falls, Nampa, and Treasure Valley.
Amy, when I looked at that,
Yeah.
it looked like all of them were in incorporated areas of
Yes,
of
and
them.
I'll show you, I have maps.
Okay,
that I'll
thank
show
you. I'm
So
sorry.
you get an idea of the uses around them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thanks, that's a good point. This is, again, is straight from the Department of Corrections website. It just gives a little information on the type of offenders we'll see. They do go through an evaluation. It touches on psychological, physical, educational, and substance abuse. And they do have custody levels. You'll find that the reentry centers have what's called minimum custody, and that's based on right here. So if you want to know the custody level, essentially they do have a rating system. They evaluate each inmate before they even enter a reentry center. If you're curious to know what a disciplinary offense report is, that's if they were when they were incarcerated, how behaved essentially were they, and did they have any major offenses? So A and B would be just you might think assault, bribery, things like that. So you can't be in a reentry center with those.
With assault and bribery?
Right, so if you are incarcerated and assault another inmate, you get a Class A disciplinary report, and therefore you do not get into a reentry center. So, yeah, you don't get minimum custody assigned to you. Class C is typically if they were roughhousing or things like that.
But there's nothing on here, if I read this right, there's nothing on here is if this individual is a repeat offender.
Right.
So if they're okay this time, but they were in, their history as a,
Sure.
was not, okay.
One of the class A's is essentially is if you're an escape risk, you can't be in a reentry center too.
Okay.
And one item to keep in mind is it's more unrestricted when you're in a facility. You can move about. And you're not necessarily escorted to a job, or if you are escorted, you're not really, no one stays on site to monitor you, but the inmates have to check in when on the job site, back to the facility.
Go back to
Yeah,
that
go
thing.
ahead.
The third bullet, what is a high-risk crime?
So I actually tried to find what that is. The Department of Corrections haven't gotten back to me yet, but that is one of the questions I did pose to them. So that's a good question. Still doing a little investigating there.
The other one, low risk, is classified as non-violent, so it's violent.
Yeah, that's my assumption.
I guess fine, but-
So the East Boise Community Reentry Center, that's the address there. It was opened in 1980. It's an all-female facility, holds about 124, and then just add 24 there. That's how many beds they currently have. This is what it looks like from an aerial view. This is what it looks like inside. I got this from 2 news reports. Like dorm style for the women. These are the type of uses you might see. I don't know if you can read it very well, but surrounding it, you'll see there are usually state uses in this case. There's the Department of Agriculture, you know, Bureau of, a few state bureaus there. Or this one in particular is surrounded by state-run agencies. From their zoning map, it's actually in an area called open lands, public lands, I believe. There.
But what does R1C stand for?
I'm gonna guess those are residential. I didn't look up the surrounding, just the existing.
Yes, agreed.
This is Idaho Falls. It opened in 1996. It's 122 male inmate minimum custody facility. This is typically what they look like. East Boise is a little unique considering the age of it, but you'll see usually this cross-like structure with most of them. And this one is surrounded by industrial uses. And it is in an industrial zone. The Nampa Community Center, it was in 1985. It is also a male inmate facility. This is what this one looks like. You'll see. You can see they had probably some landscaping requirements there. And this one is, I'm gonna guess, mostly just similar uses and a lot of open space surrounding it. In this case, there's a golf course.
And
for
I'm sorry,
instance.
when was this one opened again?
1985, this one. And it is in the agricultural zoning district also. Treasure Valley is the last one. It's located in Kuna, Idaho. It's probably the newer one. It's 2004. All-male facility, about 108 inmates. Of course, I don't think Google updated their map yet. Right now, it's still farmland. But that's what the general area. It's a lot of open space there.
Yeah, CUNA's expanded pretty rapidly, so.
Yeah. So.
It's, as you can see, it's in the southeastern corner of the city.
Yep, so there's the corner there. So interestingly, I learned just this after I put this PowerPoint together, is it was established when Ada County still had jurisdiction, and then the ACI expanded. So that's why it's kind of on the edge of the city. And that was fairly recent ACI renegotiation. So what I found as far as zoning, there's not a lot. I did reach out to the communities, but only East Boise and Idaho have gotten back to me so far. More than likely, it's a non-conforming use. It was there before zoning could be written to address them. As far as the East Boise one, Ada County did provide some input that they have what's called public, quasi-public use. Essentially, it's a state-run facility, so they usually provide their own regulations in the case when one's established. And then Idaho Falls, fairly similar. If one was to be established in Idaho Falls, the hearing body is the planning commission for a conditional use permit.
But if they have that 1,000 feet
They do,
property line from residential,
yes. Yeah.
okay?
And so that's pretty much it. That's all I could find in
That's pretty good.
a week. But
That's a good
hopefully
job.
give you some background.
Thank you so much, that's really helpful. Any questions within
So the one that may come or be proposed for here, is that all male?
Oh, I don't know.
We have
Yes,
no application, but,
That's
yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's gonna be
Are we
male.
all
At least that's what the director told
How
me.
do we know that?
The director told me that.
yeah, I think, again, we don't have there's no application, we don't know what, we're just trying to get, generally speaking, a land use code, and this is helpful for us to understand what may need to be included in that land use code. One question I did have, you may have mentioned it, but I may have missed it, is when it's early release or whatever, what is the period of time is it 6 months before your sentence is up, or is it a year?
18.
It's 18 months, okay. So it's 18 months, and obviously if they have an infraction, they would go back, okay.
And one thing that I did find out is they are serving time still, and there's a period of parole after. So there's probably another program that they're put into after.
But they're not at the center at that time. Once they parole, they're back wherever they happen to be.
So with that information, that was one of the things I was gonna address over here, is the definition then that we have here would not be accurate. Because it says that, the facility for the housing, rehabilitation, and training of persons on probation, parole, or early release from correctional institutions, or other persons found guilty of criminal offenses. This isn't early release, these are still active inmates.
Yeah, that, sorry, that was just kind of a placeholder definition.
Okay.
I think you have to think that
What about it?
everything in here is a placeholder.
It's a first
Well, I
rough
figured we were
draft.
supposed to discuss it and,
Yeah, we
Yeah.
will. I
Yeah,
think,
I mean, it would certainly, have to be amended to reflect
Yeah,
the actual use
okay.
by IDOC.
okay.
and we'll turn it over to Pat and David in a second. What the draft code that we all have in front of us right now is really a combination of what was the transitional group housing, plus David had some information from, I believe it was Dallas.
Actually, this is more Dallas.
Okay, more
And
Dallas,
and
yeah.
Pat's put it into our format.
Okay, so that
And
he had.
just so you know,
Yeah,
this Dallas information dates back to 1970.
okay. And as David said, what we'd like to do now is just turn it over to them, and as we go over each of the areas that are in the code, we'd like to discuss them, change them, add to them, or agree to them, pretty much. So I'm going to turn it over to, Pat, are you going to facilitate this, or?
I'll at least start.
Okay,
Just to let you know, the highlighted, and everything is, the whole thing is definitely on the table, but I did highlight some things, mainly numbers that,
Or especially on the.
yeah, would be,
Right.
top, I would consider to be topics of more in-depth discussion. But again, the whole thing, it's a rough draft, and indicated as such to David and Dave.
Right.
And so, fire away on this. Again, Deborah mentioned, we'll have to refine the definition to match the mission of the Idaho Department of Corrections with respect to these facilities. And also, I think that, the impetus for this is just to try to get out in front of this, with there being at least a conceptual proposal on the table for somewhere north of the Salmon River. This will allow us to, evaluate whether it should be within the unincorporated county, and then if it were approved, to set standards for it, to meet community concerns as well as, the state standards that they would have to follow anyway. So, I think that's just a fairly brief introduction. I think, discussion is certainly warranted at this point, unless David has anything to add.
David, are you okay?
Thinking.
Well, if we want to start with the zones, I mean, I think you just go down this thing.
That's probably good as any.
Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, that came from transitional, the transitional
Housing.
housing, facilities, which, this.
And that
was
actually-
likely not all, I'm sure not all of these are appropriate for this type of facility, but I didn't change it because I wanted to change it after we had discussion.
Right.
Amy brought a map of our zone districts that would apply to
Okay.
high density, commercial, industrial.
I'm not even sure HDR would be appropriate. I just held it over from the
Yeah, we
other.
only have 5 or 6.
The others only 5.
Yeah, mobile home parks mostly, existing
Yeah,
ones.
so-
Bayview.
You can go.
And then Bayview,
Yeah.
yeah.
To high
Oh, and
density.
Twin Lakes too, isn't it?
Is there? I know Twin Lakes Village is a PUD. I don't think it's actually zoned high density residential.
Do you have the pointer, Amy?
Yep.
So, it might be helpful if you turned off the addressing layer, and then you could see the parcels better, and you can point out each area by color.
It's a little out of order, I apologize.
Well, I also wanted to emphasize this doesn't reflect any, any position for or against any particular proposal by anybody. This is just
Just a
to,
starting point.
yeah, just to try to provide specific, process for approval, give us the ability to provide a process for approval or denial of a permit application and provide standards for the ones that are approved.
So question?
Yeah.
Well, 2 things actually. I have information that is probably of value at this level that I'd be happy to share. This is a minimum area of 3 acres. And I was looking here in high density residential.
You're right, that's not
Yeah,
compatible
yeah,
with
that's-
that.
Yeah, okay.
So from a zone point of view, I mean, are we saying that high-density residential may not be appropriate?
I would say would not be appropriate.
Would not be.
Is everybody, any comments
Yeah.
on that?
The only thing to discuss, Mr. Chairman, would be if someone wanted to request a rezoning in an area, high-density residential might actually be an easier and more appropriate category for this particular use than commercial or industrial. But that gets really to the crux of this central issue you should be thinking about throughout the entirety of this discussion, which is, I know we have at least one of our 3 county commissioners that would rather not allow these anywhere.
Right.
There's no requirement that we set something up that's easy. You can set it up to have really high bars if that's what you think the community should have. Or you can set it up somewhere between really high bars and somewhere between reasonableness to allow a facility that might actually work well in the community. To go there, you have to suspend judgment for a moment about anything you believe and think about, is it possible to get this through a system of review in a way that can be a good neighbor to other neighbors?
John?
Yeah, I do have a question on, do we have any high density residential zones that are not built out?
One, I think. There's very few. Most of them are what you see right here, is my memory. If there's more than one, I'd be surprised.
You, Wes?
Oh, when we get back
There's
to.
one up in Bayview too, and
Looking at those, just the very first screen that you had would be most helpful, where those brown areas were a little larger.
Yeah, here, I can make it easier. I have to go back to the keyboard.
I think you just wanted you to zoom back in.
Yeah, I just need a
So
bigger.
Pat, quick, while we're waiting for this, does the state have any statutes? I was trying to look this morning that govern these kind of facilities that we would have to take into consideration?
I actually haven't had a chance to look at that. I do know the state is subject to land use jurisdiction of cities and counties unless it's part of the state highway system or state school endowment lands.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help a little?
No. Well, I mean, a little bit. I wanted to get them enlarged.
Back in.
Zoom back in?
Yeah, zoom back in where I think you want to look.
Okay, let's take the one the south of, I guess it's I-90, where it says CUP and then just right there. What's inside of there right now? Does anybody know?
Right there,
Yeah.
see where that's at?
Which one is it, though?
Is that
Coming out.
40,
Oh,
is
okay.
that 41?
All right.
Yeah, it's 41 Celtice I-90. It's right off of Maplewood Avenue, between Maplewood and Third.
Is that the particle board line?
No.
That's just open field.
Okay.
Is that where that trailer park was at?
It was, yeah, it's been
Particle board, is it?
It's been removed, and I'm suspecting it'll get annexed into the city when it gets developed.
And I
So,
thought they were planning commercial
so
to
what,
put in there.
my question is, what is inside there now? Is it residences?
There was a trailer park in there west that they moved all the trailers out of. I think it's just sitting vacant right now.
Yeah,
All
that's
right,
my
let's
recollection.
go north then. Okay, what's in, either one of those two big ones? Trailers?
Yeah, two existing mobile home parks.
There and there?
Yeah,
Okay, and then the one that was over that way?
Little one.
Yeah.
another existing mobile home park.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then try just that last one, which is over there. I think there's another one, but it's right on the freeway.
Where did it go? There it is.
That one.
Oh, that's the St. Vincent's transitional housing
I was gonna say, it looked like a
apartments.
group facility of some
Yeah.
sort in there,
All right.
It was just apartment, and then St. Vincent de Paul bought it out.
What's down in that really long one down there? Nothing?
That's Centennial Trail property, the county owns.
That's really not useful for development.
Yeah. All right.
Then we're getting ready to put some real, like cluster kind of homes in there?
That'd be a bad idea. right
Okay,
next
well, I
to
know there
it.
was a real narrow strip the city was.
I hope
kind of-
not.
You know what I'm talking about, Dave? Yeah.
All right.
So
Unless they're
back,
gonna super insulate them.
yeah, so back to David's question about the zones is, the issue of high-density residential today may not be a viable option.
Right.
The question would be is, would we want to leave it in as a consideration for potential rezoning? capabilities.
So it leaves the door open, but leaves very few opportunities for it to utilize.
Well, since it's a rezoning, that's a high hurdle to pass anyway.
Right. So instead of limiting what we have, leave it there to not.
It's not a big deal if you leave it
Right,
in
that's
my
what I'm
view.
trying to say.
Right.
And I
You know,
agree.
if we leave it in, it probably will, as today's zones are, it won't be applicable.
And it certainly doesn't open the barn door.
Right.
No, you wanna see pitchforks and torches come out.
Can we go up to Bayview and look at that one too?
Is there something around Spirit Lane?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But yeah, let's just go north and kind of survey it. Bayview's gonna be at the very top of the map.
That's a good idea, Pat, thanks.
Northeast corner, top right, yeah, that's Bayview right there.
Yeah, there it is.
Left, that's where-
There's only one up there?
Yeah, I thought there was more than that, but maybe it is just the one.
All the way to the right.
And that's not gonna be suitable for a facility like that, because it's on the side of Cape Horn,
Right.
so.
And tough to get there,
Good escape,
Slightly.
that lake.
especially when the road collapses, it makes it really tough. Yes, and the fire.
Put in a Navy facility there.
Well, the naval facility would frown on it too,
Oh, the people in Bayview.
is my guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does everybody feel, I mean, John, about the high-density residential? I'll go around just trying to get some views. Leave it in, okay with leaving it in as a potential option?
I think based on what David, Director Callahan is saying, yeah.
I think it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, obviously, we don't want to create limitations that look like we're trying to restrict it, like some farm or.
Madeline, are you okay? Wes?
It may be okay, but I think it would be a mistake, because of the word residential. And if it's fairly easy to facilitate the inclusion of it later, when circumstances come up, that might be the time.
Would it-
Easy as in a code amendment?
Yes.
Well, you know how long those take.
Well, I'm just asking. I'm holding my finger up in the wind.
Okay,
My turn?
yeah,
Let me qualify my answer. Because I've spoken with both the director and IDOC's director and the director of the Nampa facility, I have information. Some of it is that there is discussion going on right now to allow violent criminals and sex
okay,
offenders to be.
so let's, can we?
This is important if where we're gonna put it.
No, we don't know that. Discussions, we're here to talk about the
Okay, then let me
code.
tell you this, in the Nampa facility right now, they are housing violent offenders, sex offenders, and they have a murderer in there right now. So I think that we can consider the fact that they might put the kind of an inmate in this facility
Right,
as well.
but that would be considered during the application process. What we're trying to do, as we discussed it previously, is limit this to the code. So we don't know what we're gonna, what the applicant, we may not
Well,
even get an application.
That might be germane to determining what the appropriate zones would be.
Thank you, Pat. That's
But
what
we
I'm
don't
trying
know.
to
That-
stress. Well,
It's a
I mean,
slippery-
I get that, but I also get that we're trying to decide what zones that, you know,
Right,
that might even potentially house this type of facility.
And I can tell you, in Dallas, for example, where we cribbed most of this stuff, it was commercial and industrial properties that the city limited it
Okay.
to.
yeah, and Pat,
Because in a city like that, with over 1 million people, you had huge areas of industrial and commercial lands, so it really wasn't a limiting factor. It just kept them very far away from any residential areas. And if that's your desire, that would be a reason to eliminate.
So if we go back up to the map and we look at commercial mining and light industrial, where the zones are located right now, that might shed a little bit of light in terms of what would be available. Because we looked just at high-density residential on the map.
yeah. But I also think that when we get to F, we'd have to talk about the 1,000 feet.
So Pat, so then the question for you is, can we put a provision in that says those type of inmates would not be allowed to be housed in this facility, as I mentioned?
We could do it, I don't know if it would stick.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's kind of my answer. It's like theoretically, we could, but I would expect pushback from the state.
And there was
And I don't know
questions.
that they wouldn't sneak them in somewhere anyway, we wouldn't know.
Okay, so,
And we've dealt, and they've
I
also
mean,
had,
you could say, you know, one thing you could say is if, say you left high-density residential and then no violent offenders would be allowed in a facility located
In that district.
in that zone, yeah.
in that particular zone.
Right.
Because they have had escapes. And so,
Right.
you know, I mean, I doubt that they're gonna wanna stick around if they escape, they're gonna split the scene, but, you know, it's just, to me, I think these kind of situations and issues should be considered. So I'm gonna say no, I don't think it should be in high-density residential, that's my vote.
well, now we have 3-2, 4, but
No,
Do we-
my thing was, I didn't say yes or no. I said, the problem, it seems to me, is the word residential.
I understand that, but that's what the zone's called.
I know.
And it's hard, so I don't like it either, to be honest with
The
you.
other thing you could do is bump up the acreage for high-density residential. Make it 10 acres, make it 20 acres, make some number.
Right, that's why that was highlighted.
Okay, so what do we want to do? I'm just trying to get, do we want to leave it in there and then put a caveat, either that a high-density residential, that it would be limited to a certain amount of, certain type of inmate, or to the other alternative is to just increase the high-density residential minimum area? Anybody have an opinion? Or just take it out? I mean, we still,
My
I think we
opinion would be
qualify
just to
right now.
take it out.
Probably easier to take it out if we have to qualify it at this point.
well,
I think
Well-
there's enough other available land in those other three zones
Right.
if they needed, you know, if they wanted to come here and it was gonna be built, I think there's enough available land.
so Barry, you're supporting,
Well, I'm not, I guess this goes back to Pat, what goes from
yeah.
a legal standpoint. It's-
Do we, okay, I'm okay with it, leaving it in or taking it out, to be honest. The other zoning question I had, would we include industrial as well as the other three non-residential zones?
Well, that's,
Normally, we don't allow residential facilities in the
In the
industrial
industrial
zone,
zone.
but would
This
this
is
be a
unique. This is
proper
unique.
exception?
okay. So, just want to verify, John, are you still okay with leaving it in?
I think I'm okay with leaving it in because of, you know, we haven't got there yet, but if we get down to paragraph F and we start talking about things that are gonna affect paragraph A,
Right,
and,
okay,
so,
It'd be an excruciatingly rare circumstance.
okay. And Madeline, you still okay with leaving it in?
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh,
And like I said, I given his answer, which was, I'm still okay with it, so it's not.
Okay,
restricted
so
once again.
right now, as of this moment, we will, this is a draft, of course, but we'll leave it in there. And Commercial-
Again, that's far from final. I mean,
Yeah.
Still gotta go through the public.
First cut.
yeah, I mean, when we have public hearings, or people will give us other feedback along the way.
well, I think the first conclusion someone's gonna jump to is that this is gonna be plopped down in the middle of a bunch of homes and apartments.
And I think that that's the concern of Wes's, where the word residential is there, and that is gonna be a job for us to explain what this really is. And we could use the Keeping Kootenai site to communicate what it is. But I think that was Wes's concern.
That is a concern. I mean, the word residential is a ignition switch.
Yeah, you're gonna see pitchforks and torches, I'm telling you.
I have no doubt about that.
But for the moment, let's just keep it in there, and when all the changes are made, we're gonna review it again anyway, and we can continue this discussion. Is everybody okay with commercial? Yeah, John?
One more point, this is consistent with the transition housing, is that right?
Yes, those are the zones where those,
Uses are allowed, that uses are.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, now, commercial? Any concerns about commercial? Okay, mining?
The only thing I thought about mining was how much infrastructure is there on mining land?
No, but-
Because we're talking about putting in an actual facility, we're not
Right.
having porta potties or, you know. And if we're putting it in a zone that doesn't have sufficient infrastructure, then who is gonna be responsible for that infrastructure? And do we have the
State.
capacity?
The state would have to make it work. And if it doesn't, if the math doesn't pan out, then it doesn't go in that district.
A lot of the mining here, of course, is aggregate, okay?
Right.
And if you look at aggregate areas, let's say over the Rathrum Prairie, you dig down in the aggregate, and let's say the facility was somewhere down there, then you're closer to the aquifer. So that kind of factors in too, in terms of availability to it, in terms of wastewater, for
Right,
example.
exactly.
yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure
just
what the-
just wastewater treatment alone is probably gonna make this self-limiting to a large degree.
Right.
At least in the unincorporated.
Yep.
David, on just a general question, all facilities have to be approved when an application comes in. Everything, it still has to meet the standards for Panhandle Health,
Right.
all the other things. So
Right.
things like roads and everything else will have to be addressed during some process of the application process.
Regardless of where you put it.
Regardless of where you put it, okay.
Right.
Okay,
Pat,
anybody?
question?
Yeah,
I know we touched on this before, and unfortunately, I spaced out and didn't come to the last meeting, so I don't know what you guys all discussed then. If we had no ordinance addressing this issue, would the commissioners be able to reject it altogether and say, sorry, we have no provision for this, so we're gonna deny this application?
No.
They wouldn't?
In that way, we're more vulnerable. It's better to have something on the books.
Okay, I just wanted to get that clear.
Right.
Okay.
you know, what Pat, I think Pat, what you said last time was, the state usually respects and honors local land use codes, right?
Well, they're required to meet them, except in the two exceptions I
Yeah,
mentioned before.
right.
Yeah.
So having something, they're gonna generally
For
respect.
land use, building is different.
Yeah, oh, okay. All right, so mining, everybody, I'm thinking everybody's okay, and then light industrial?
So light industrial can have some residential and correct, they can live upstairs above their business and.
I would
Can you give me an
separate,
example?
I would separate in your mind the fact that these zoning districts do or don't allow residential. The logic is that they're impactful enough, the uses that go into these commercial, light industrial mining zoning districts are sufficiently impactful that no reentry facility is going to create any more intensity of impact.
In other words, light industrial and industrial residential uses are not generally allowed, but having it as a conditional use permit would
Is what makes it work.
provide for, would basically be an exception to that if the permit is approved.
Well, it sounds, I think that all the other facilities are in these kind of zones, correct?
That's what you just saw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that would be consistent with the practice in Southern Iowa.
Right. And it's the standard land use planning practice. Again, if we pulled Dallas's ordinance, it would show that commercial, industrial, and so on are allowed places.
So everybody's okay with light industrial?
Residential uses in
Oh.
light industrial
Oh,
zone.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
Mary wants to jump in.
Yeah, Mary.
Rose on this.
Thank you. you, Chairman. The uses prohibited in light industrial zone include residential uses.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And again, there's a language except as approved in a CUP. It's-
Right.
Okay.
And Pat, you were talking about adding
There's one caretaker.
industrial?
Caretakers?
Right.
Yeah, by the
That's
same
only
law,
for mini stores.
Sure. okay.
basically using the same logic as light industrial.
So is there, you
Oh, you can have this one.
Oh, okay.
can have microphone.
Oh,
Did you eat yours already?
I already ate this good.
Okay, so do we want, does anybody, let's go around and talk about industrial. Do we want it using the same logic we use for light industrial? Is it okay to add industrial in there? And I don't know why we didn't add that for,
Because he was using the transitional house.
no, I'm wondering
Yeah.
when we did transitional housing, I don't remember, Deborah, why we didn't include that in,
I believe the logic was that industrial can have really caustic uses.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's generally not a good place for people to live.
okay,
And I think that logic prevails here.
And
yeah.
I think that they were thinking that the industrial folks would not be happy about having it there.
Okay, so are we saying,
Industrial out.
yeah, everybody okay with just leaving it at these four as of this moment, with a need on high-density residential to definitely communicate what that means to the county citizens, because maybe
So,
confused.
so
Yeah.
So,
how,
Pat-
how would you explain that?
I don't know.
I wouldn't get mired in that weed right now.
Yeah,
Let's wait and see if it actually ends up in the proposed ordinance, and then you got a little ways to go.
Again, Pat, or David, this would almost have to, if an application came in, they'd almost have to be done in an ACI area, I'm assuming, because they'd have to hook up to city services.
Yeah, there are sewer districts in the unincorporated county that provide sewer service, so that would be another option.
And water.
Okay,
So it's confusing.
okay,
So,
Unlikely.
like I said, to a large degree, that's gonna be a self-limiting factor anyway.
yeah, yeah,
But we also don't wanna be, we also don't wanna be kind of this, unregulated haven. If the city's regulated too.
So do we know why 20 years ago, when they were planning on doing this over there in Hayden, do we know how, they actually bought the land before the residents put up a fight. Do we know why that they walked away from that then, Pat?
My recollection is because of the overwhelming opposition.
Yeah, and they're gonna get it this time too, yeah.
yeah, I think, we'll leave these in there, we'll communicate it somehow with the keeping Kootenai once we figure out how to do that, if it's in the final version. But that's what we did with the comp plan. The other thing about the thing you talked about, Deborah, is our updated comp plan does encourage and want these facilities to be with adequate infrastructure in it.
Sure.
So, we would wonder how something like this could be done. The other thing is access to jobs. That's gonna be closer to where the cities are than not. So let's go to item B, which is the 3 acres. Yeah, well, I think, it takes us a while to get going, Barry.
So now, we said that was a self-eliminating issue already for high density.
Yeah, for high density.
Unless,
Let's-
unless they were able to successfully rezone
Rezoning.
property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily inconsistent in that instance at least.
And I'm assuming, Amy, that the existing facilities all would have fit in to, 3 acres or something like that.
Well, that's what they're looking for, I know
Yeah.
that, they're looking for at least 3 acres.
Yeah. So anybody have any heartburn with leaving it as 3 for the moment?
Put a 0 behind the 3, maybe.
Yeah, that's what you Pat, that's meaning minimal parcel size, right?
Right.
Right, okay.
What was the
Yes.
question, Wes?
Yeah, 3 acres means minimal parcel size, not below.
Yeah,
All right.
all right, good. Okay, adequate fencing and screening. It looks like the other facilities didn't actually have fencing.
They don't.
They don't, okay.
Well, but the one sheet, it looks like they had them put some vegetation trees
Yeah,
to
they had
kind of create
some,
some
yeah.
screening, but, yeah, they don't have any fencing.
So this was, I think, Pat from, or maybe David, it
I
could
think
have.
they came out of Dallas.
Yeah. So what do we think
It's
about
still
the,
in their regs today.
yeah,
Adequate's kind of
A loose word.
I'm
And one could argue that if all the facilities in Idaho don't have any fencing, then it's not adequate.
Yeah, and frankly, I'm not even sure what advantage it is to put that in there, because they're allowed, they're set free into the community already, you know, to work.
The
So I'm not
usefulness is
sure.
a discussion item in a public hearing through a CUP.
Okay,
I also think that the screening is important.
And you can imagine a case where there's more proximity of more people where fencing might be a useful thing.
Yeah.
So now the question, when it says adequate fencing and screening, that's not an or, it's and. They would have to, whatever adequate means for fencing and whatever in the process of the application is determined to be adequate.
If
Screening.
none is determined, that's where you end up.
Yeah.
Again, you can imagine where some would be useful on one side, none on another, so on and
Right.
so forth.
right, right.
So is everybody okay with C?
The only other thing is that, let's say you had this as a location, and today you have residences here, but in 15 years you have residences here.
CUPs can have time limits.
Yeah.
And you can
But I mean-
re-review.
But I mean, you want to probably leave a provision in here
Yeah.
so that you can adjust.
Because the word adequate basically gives the approver
Right.
the ability to determine if it's adequate today, but it may not be adequate. You know, for
Right.
every 5 years, you have to get this thing approved anyway, I
Uh-huh.
think. Okay, leave it in, okay? All right, now, D. And this is about parking, and Pat, you may want to, it's really about off-street parking for residents, staff, and visitors. The number of spots. They didn't want to cause overcapacity of the areas around, which is normally what we do for almost any kind of building on that. What comments, John?
Well, when I was reading through it, I was wondering, you know, how or why it should be addressed here if it's gonna be addressed in the CUP. I mean, is this the kind of thing that would be
This
addressed?
gives us the authority to ask for it in the CUP.
Yeah, and it provides guidelines for making that determination, so they're not just getting a number off the top of their head.
One would hope.
Well, it looks, I mean, that looks like what it's,
That's
in
what
order
it's
to come
aiming
up
at.
with the answer, they're gonna have to do something more
Some-
than just guess.
Usually a traffic engineer is
Right.
involved.
So what other comments do we have on item D?
So you're thinking of availability of public transit, and I mean, that's not a big issue, but for the inmates or for the staff?
Yes.
Both? Yeah, because I don't think the inmates are gonna be allowed to use public transit much, from what I've been told.
Okay,
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah, in Kootenai County, it's unlikely that it will be available unless,
Anyway,
unless
yeah.
it's in a city.
Right, that's not in that area.
Okay, so are we okay with what we have?
Anyway.
Looks like I'm getting yeses, okay? E is really on the loading piece of it. Off-street loading, and I'm assuming it's for bringing products to the,
Right.
It's getting pretty.
Groceries.
That or, you know, picking up and dropping off, that makes
Okay.
sense potentially.
and it'll be set, so this is basically saying, Pat, it's gonna be set forth in the condition of the approval.
Yes.
permit,
Yes.
Okay. We don't know what it is today, but we will set it at that time.
Usually one docking bay, so semi can load and unload.
Okay. Right,
It looks like they just kind of pull up to an entrance into the facilities.
Yeah,
Front
actually,
building,
that's
where
kind
that
of a,
circle
actually
driveway
kind of a
is.
good illustration, to be honest. see like here, this would be the loading area, and then you have your main parking.
Oh, I see, okay.
And they don't provide a whole lot of spaces here, so.
Well, they don't have a large staff
Right.
either, so. And I don't know about visitors.
Yeah, well, they they can and do, regulate, who and when,
It
and where.
looks like they
visitors.
have some like vans or something like that parked there that they use. So I know they let the inmates drive their fellow inmates to work. So they probably use those vans.
Okay. I was wondering about that. On F, Pat, I guess I had one question on F, well, I have a couple questions, but one, is there a reason why we have that first sentence in there?
I was just gonna say, I need to explain that one.
Yeah.
There's an important reason,
Yeah, because it's the law,
the federal law.
That's a
both
good
federal and state law, that if it's 8 or fewer, it's treated as a single-family residence.
Okay,
At least
Group,
if it's-
group homes by federal law have to be allowed.
And most inmates are recovering alcoholics, drug addicts, et cetera, or could be disabled physically, mentally, or
got it,
both.
okay.
So they would,
Fall
they're,
under that.
yeah, so that's, kind of just a prophylactic to make sure that, we
This came up during transitional housing, do you remember
Yeah,
now?
yeah, I do,
Yeah.
I really do, yeah.
and that's, and honestly, that has come up, that particular issue has come up in cities where people are complaining about group homes where people,
Halfway houses and stuff.
yeah, like group, those real small group homes that, have people that are like on parole or, coming
Well,
back to
and
the
I think-
community. And that's why, and that's why there's not a lot cities can do about that.
Well, you can include like the safe houses and stuff in that too.
Right, but the facility, type of facility we're talking about obviously would house a lot more than 9 residents,
Right.
so.
The next part of that is the 50 resident number. The current facilities have, I think, between 108 and 124.
Yeah, that might not necessarily be realistic.
So we could leave 50 and then
And then you're done.
they're done.
I like it, the 50, yeah.
I'm,
40 would even be
yeah.
better, and I have a reason for saying that.
Okay. But, so the question would be is, do we make it within the range that the current other facilities are, or the number is an arbitrary number. Pat didn't, I think we may have talked about it last time. John,
Do
you
we have
have,
a number on transitional housing? Do we have a
transitional
number?
housing was so much smaller.
That was the number.
Yeah,
50 was the number of those?
yeah, we didn't expect the initial test to even be that large,
Right.
if I remember correctly.
Right.
So it's, generally, it looks like they're housing about, they've expanded a couple of them over the years, but it looks like they're housing 100 and 125 people at any given time. And I actually had a question of how do you measure 50 people, residents anyway? Is it on average for the month? Is it the first day of the month? Because you can have people coming and going.
I would say maximum
Maximum.
capacity.
Capacity, okay.
Like a fire code.
So we'd have to change that to be capacity driven. Okay. So what's the thoughts about numbers? You want 40, I know that. You just said.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking, you all know that I have a tremendous amount of information in my head, and I can't share it all now. But I'm sitting here thinking, how much of a endless influx of felons do we want to be brought into our community who are highly likely to reoffend? Do we want to limit that number, or do we want to let it be a larger number?
That's the question.
Well, I think the idea is putting them where they lived before they got into the system to make it less likely that nobody offended.
Well, you realize that they're planning on putting inmates in this facility from the 10 northern counties, so they're not all from Coogee County.
I realize that, yeah. And that's true, I'm sure that's true of the ones in southern Idaho as well.
Yeah.
So what's thoughts about the numbers?
Well, 50 relatively low and may appease people of concern, but 100's more realistic. And so I don't have the answer, I just know those are the kind of the polls.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really becomes an issue of, do we want this to represent what the models are today, or what we want the model to be if an application was submitted?
Well, if you say 50, it'll be hard to nudge it up. If you say higher, it may be easier to nudge it down.
I think it'd be the opposite.
Really?
You think so?
Yeah, I do, yeah, because they could always expand the facility.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the adoption of the code.
The code.
The code. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about that at all.
So if we say 100, it's easier to go from 100 to 50 than it is to go from 50
As
to...
you're going through the public hearing process? you
Yeah,
mean?
or if you,
Oh.
anytime you amend a code, if you make it, depending on what it is, more restrictive, it may be more popular than with the citizens or whatever. So it's a real question of, this is where the decision for this group has to be, is what do you want this to represent? What is, this 50 is not a number that was based on anything except transitional housing.
Right.
So it wasn't based on a reentry center, it wasn't based on, a halfway house type of things. So, again, if we were just using the state's examples, we would make it maximum capacity for 124 people or 100 people, or whatever the number would be.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I ask Amy,
Yes.
you would know, of the facilities you looked at, which one of them actually went through a full review process?
To be honest, I couldn't find one that went through a full review.
So we don't actually know the upper limit of people that went through a review.
Right, and the facility that expanded, I tried to ask, how, assuming it was non-conforming, how did it expand? And it was probably left up to the state, essentially, they probably just added to
Okay.
their structure and added beds.
Well, under our regulations, they couldn't exceed
Exactly.
something that's non-conforming, but,
Right.
okay.
So
Well-
Pat, if we said 50, and we know, just from looking at the other five, that that's not what they're looking at. We basically are saying no at 50. And they probably aren't gonna build a multi-million dollar facility.
Or
for
two or three
50.
of them at 50 pop,
Right.
50 each.
Right. So can the state challenge that? 50,
Yeah, well, technically, they could challenge the whole thing if, they wanted to argue preemption, although I don't think that's, I would disagree with that argument, but I think that would be their argument, is that their regulations supersede ours, at least to the extent that they're inconsistent.
But piggybacking on that, every jurisdiction reserves the right to pick numbers that it thinks feel comfortable with the community. If 50 is your number, then the state has to live with that,
Or challenge it.
or challenge
or
it.
challenge it? And that's what I'm asking,
And-
is are we gonna get into a big battle here that
Well, every battle's a big one when you go to court, but I think we could defend this one.
I don't think any of the other facilities they haven't gone through any of this, they've never been.
That'd be the starting point for the defense.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, this is the first time the communities or the county has been able to jump on top of it before the thing was even
And
brought
just to
in.
piggyback, Pat can jump in on this, but generally, the courts have decided that it's a local municipality call as to what's reasonable. And since there are no state regulations as a starting point of what number it should be, we can start with what we think's reasonable. If 50 is your number, or if 25 is your number, that's what we can go forward with and see what happens.
Here's a question for Amy. Maybe you
Yes.
have the answer. Has there been creep? Has there been population creep in these various facilities? They started out low and
Yes.
gradually Do you have any information on that?
As far as I know, they, if you go to the corrections website, Iowa Department of Corrections, they just say the date it was established, how many inmates they can have. So I'm gonna assume they probably started
They
with
just set a
70 beds.
capacity.
Well, the East Boise one was expanded in 2000, is expanding this year, or last year in 2019.
Well,
So-
you can anticipate
Yeah,
that.
so they, I think what by creep is, I think they've added capacity at these facilities. At least one of them was added. I think there may have been another one, but yeah, that's how it comes. And again, it appears they weren't approved under any kind of, so they could probably have whatever they want to do. The other way to look at this is the 50 number can be the number initially. If the facility was approved, application came in, the facility was approved, and it was built, and it was successful, then they could always come back and ask for amendment to
The code.
the code to expand it to 75. And so you could do this in steps versus giving them 100, whatever.
Well,
You
it's
could do
kind of like
that way.
our jail, Wes, as the population has increased, they had to expand the jail. So I would anticipate that this would be responded to the same way as the population increases and there's more need to house these inmates, they would probably want to expand it.
So let's go around and just see where we are. Right now, we have 50. John, what's your view of the number?
You get to be first all the time.
Yeah. let's
Okay,
do
I'm gonna
that.
start this way next
Oh,
time,
you
John,
know
I promise.
We know what her answer is.
40.
40.
Yeah, I guess because I think 50, it's so hard to keep separate what we're supposed to be doing versus how we might feel.
Exactly, it is.
Yeah.
But I think 50 is like saying, don't come up here.
Yeah, it's like poking you at the state.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I think just running the numbers and given the population of southern Idaho, particularly in the Treasure Valley area, it stands to reason that this, facility in the somewhere in the 10 northern counties would likely be smaller anyway.
Yeah, but Idaho Falls is fair.
Say that again?
Idaho Falls.
It's more fair to us as far as population density. Blackwood, Idaho Falls.
True, but it also would cover like Pocatello, Twin Falls, all that area too.
So I'm inclined to go with like 100.
Okay. Barry?
I think 100 is probably reasonable.
And I think, yeah, we don't want to upset the state and get them to find a way around things. We want to try to look like we're at least being cooperative as
Right.
opposed to not being cooperative at all. So I agree.
Madeline?
I would say so too. I mean,
100?
Again, it's hard to separate what
I know.
you want from,
It's totally difficult to do that, because we're not robots. But, okay, 100, yeah.
75.
You're the one that said 100.
I got 75, 75, anybody, 80.
Okay, we have, 75 for Wes, and we have John and Barry and Madeline at 100, and Deborah, you're less than 75, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a reason to say 40,
Okay,
but I'm gonna say 40,
okay.
and you'll find out why I say 40.
Okay, we'll find out.
Yeah.
Right. All right, for the moment, we'll put in, we have 3-2. So we have, at the moment, it will be 100. We have to change this. It would be-
Just to carry forward for purposes of discussion, further discussion.
Okay, but can we change it to, is it capacity? No, Sarah, you said you were going to change it from residence to capacity? So we have to change it.
I have that, yeah. I have
Okay.
that.
Okay. All right, then the next issue on here really is the 1,000 feet. Is that 1,000 feet like a common, I saw it
Yes.
up on the, so that's a common way of doing it.
Is that practical and high density?
That's where it comes from.
If it's a zone change to high density,
Then
and
you
you
can
have
do it.
just like, yeah.
Okay.
So,
But otherwise it becomes that self-limiting factor.
Right.
okay, So everybody okay with, the only thing we've changed on F is we went from 50 to 100.
Once again, David, where did this come from?
It's
1,000 feet?
Variety of places.
Yeah,
Pretty common.
it's a
It's
pretty-
common, that's
pretty
what I'm-
common
it's a
It's a
sighting
common sighting
restriction.
restriction to protect residential areas.
That's what I'm-
And then G also.
Even sexually oriented businesses are typically 1,000 feet.
Right. I think already done that, or.
It's not arbitrary.
Right.
Okay, G.
No, G.
So this is basically saying that it can't be closer within 1 mile of another reentry facility or transitional group housing facility.
Where did that come from? It's probably gonna be different 40 and 40.
Well, I think this becomes a question really of, if you want to limit how often this can be used in the area, you would want this to be more than a mile. The likelihood, like even with transitional housing, we discussed the likelihood of having a lot of these things in one place was remote because of the funding of it. But I think the 1 mile may be, it's almost like you could keep the mile, you can go to 20 miles
I
or
mean,
5
that's-
miles.
Yeah, I was just gonna say 1 mile is pretty minimal for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can walk a mile
I
in
agree.
a few minutes.
Yeah,
So is this a good place, Pat, to maybe include schools or any daycare facilities or anything like those
Um,
other kind of facilities?
yeah,
Right, yeah,
That's a
right,
place to add it
right now, that's the 1,000 foot.
that's the 1,000 feet area on F.
from resident, okay.
See,
Oh, I see, you got
Yeah.
daycare facilities,
I mean,
yeah, I got it.
the one thing we could say is,
Yeah.
if we wanted to, you could just basically say that there can't be another one around. I mean, you could say that, right?
But we already have, in town, we have halfway houses, and what's that one that the federal prison has? That's safe passages they have in town, Pat?
Safe, yeah.
Something like that, but I doubt this is gonna, I mean,
Well, I mean, can we say we don't want you to have one in the unincorporated area?
yeah,
Very-
I'm just saying that there are some other
Did you say
facilities.
more than one?
Just one.
Just, there's
I mean,
only
you could have
allowed.
one in the unincorporated, I mean, you could do whatever we want. I mean, the mile seems not adequate enough. John, you have a thought?
I have a couple of thoughts, actually. One is I don't think a mile is adequate.
Yeah.
If it's gonna be a mile, we might as well strike it, or say we don't want more than one in the county. But looking at the title of this, reentry facilities, parentheses, halfway houses, are the only reentry facilities and halfway houses those that are run by the state?
No,
No.
there are halfway houses that are private and nonprofit.
Yeah, and the safe passages, that's a federal prison. I mean, these guys that are housed there were in federal prison.
But there may be some other privately.
Right.
Yeah, there are, yeah.
And they might be a lot less intensive and have completely different inmates.
So if we say we don't want any more than one in the county, are we limiting?
That would be the thing. I mean, my suggestion would be pick a number more than one, like 5 or 10. Because the whole idea is not to create concentrations.
Right.
of
So
these
let's
things.
say 10 miles.
Actually, I was thinking that too.
You want to do 10 miles?
10 miles might be, yeah.
That would spread things out quite a bit.
Yeah. Is that okay with 10 miles for the,
I'm fine.
It goes back to the question, are there any other reentry or transitional group housing facilities?
Yes.
yeah, it's,
Well,
in the cities, right? I mean, that's why.
No, well, Tim Remington has, I don't know if both, if there's 2, I know there's at least one that's in the county.
Okay. Yeah, but I think 10 miles, if everybody's okay with
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it's roughly the distance between the facilities in Nampa and Cuna, so I think that, I
It's
don't see.
defensible that way.
Yeah, I don't see that as not
Okay.
So
Well,
I have a question.
okay.
I certainly don't have an answer. Currently, within the county, there are how many, quote, reentry facilities, private or public?
Well, they're not called reentry facilities, they're halfway houses, they're more of a halfway
In
house.
existence, they actually are something like that.
Well, we'll see, we got St. Vinny's doing something, we got Tim Remington, I believe has 2 facilities, one for males and one for females. We have safe passages.
But
Those
by
are the 4 I know
By
of.
male, females, what type of people are, is it criminal element, is it?
Some of them are been in prison, some of them are dealing with drugs and alcohol
But they're not
issues.
But they're
currently
not currently
serving
criminals,
sentences.
right?
They're not,
really
they're
have-
not active inmates, if that's what
Right,
you're
it's-
asking.
It's a transitional housing, right?
Well, not quite,
Not
but,
quite.
yeah, they got fences,
So
they're
it depends on
locked,
our
I
definition.
mean,
Okay.
they're confined.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
if we get past the 1 mile mark, the rest of that sentence says reentry facility or transitional group housing.
Yeah, there you go.
So we are,
Well, then maybe we need to
if
add,
we say 10 miles or 20 miles or whatever that is, we're limiting transitional housing. It's like the first one that gets here gets their way and nobody else has the option within whatever limit we set.
so maybe if we keep, then maybe we need to add halfway houses into that sentence as well. Because I don't know if transitional group housing is considered the same as a halfway.
No, the halfway house and reentry facility would be synonymous in this,
Since it's titled that way.
Oh, okay.
and it would be defined that way as well.
Right.
So we can get enough transitional housing places set up.
Could preclude all the reentry facilities. But you know how likely that is.
So what do we want, I mean, that's a good point, I mean, but, so what do we want to do? The intent was not to not have a transitional housing, because you have one or the other. I mean, your point's a good point, John, on that. So what do? We had 10 miles.
Well, the intent was, can you repeat that?
Well, again, what the point is that if you make one, if you put a transitional housing in a county somewhere, this would basically make it more difficult to have a reentry facility on that. And we did the 10 miles because we didn't want a cluster of them. So how do we,
And the reverse could be true.
exactly,
So
And-
if, we're back to what we're doing here, that if, for instance, someone thought transitional housing was more beneficial to the community than reentry, then we're making it more difficult for the transitional housing.
Well, how many miles is in the county again, David?
I was just trying to think of how this works with a radius.
Yeah, we got a whole lot of
well,
miles.
is the real question, can we just, if you just put in there, eliminated transitional group housing, and just said that there can't be another reentry,
facility.
there can't be another reentry center within 10 miles, whatever number it is.
Yeah, that's basically what this
That's
is.
what we're trying to stop, and then transitional housing has its own,
It doesn't restrict transitional.
right,
housing.
transitional housing has its own land use
This
code,
doesn't restrict it though, it just restricts reentry.
right? And do you know what the transitional housing,
Right.
Pat, does it have a requirement of not having another one near it?
Yeah, that's the 1 mile, where the 1
Okay.
mile came from.
So transitional housing wouldn't be precluded from opening up, but if one opened up, it would have its own regulation about how close another transitional housing. And if we just took out the word transitional group words, transitional group housing, what we're saying here is another reentry center can't be located within 10 miles, which is probably ain't gonna happen anyway. The
Yeah,
state's not-
20, the closest two in southern Idaho are 25 or 15 miles apart.
Yeah,
And then the next closest are 25 miles apart.
So what is the purpose? What is our real purpose then for creating some distance between them?
between the two of them,
Well,
Or just between?
by limiting the distance between two similar facilities, what is our real purpose? The reason why I'm asking that question is because some of the individuals who are housed in transitional group housing are there because they have come out of prison recently. They may not be, they may be on parole or probation, but if we're trying to not concentrate a certain group of people in one area, then that's something to consider, that
And then that was the purpose of this, Deborah?
yeah, and
was
so
not-
traditional group
yeah.
housing could just
Yeah.
as well have recent felons, people that have just recently gotten out of
Right.
prison housed there.
Well, what we could do is just take out transitional group housing. And if we did that, you gotta remember that transitional group housing has its own CUP process.
Yes,
This has a CUP process. If a transitional housing or a reentry facility wanted to locate near the other,
yes.
that would be part of the CUP process, that would be reviewed by the hearing examiner, and the county commissioners make a decision if that's a good location for it. Yeah.
Let me read let me try
I
a
think we
sentence
need
and see
10
if that
miles.
sentence might work.
Okay.
G, a reentry facility, a reentry facility may not be located within 10 miles from another reentry facility, parentheses, if halfway house means the same thing, period.
Right.
Close parentheses, period.
Right, that basically separates transitional housing, which has its own CUP, and reentry center facility / halfway house, which has its own CUP. And they're basically separate, and each will be evaluated. So is everybody okay with just simply going and taking out the word, just put a period at the end of facility, reentry facility?
Well, that's not what I said. What I said was 10 miles, reentry facility, parentheses, halfway house,
Right.
parentheses, close, and period.
Right, right.
So I'd like to leave the transitional group housing in, and I'd like to have the distance changed to 10 miles.
Okay, but Wes has a proposal, you have a proposal,
Well,
which you, right?
Well, I'm just saying,
No, I understand. You
yeah.
want to leave it with a 10-mile,
Yeah, Wes and I agree on the 10 miles,
right?
but I'd like to
Okay.
leave the transitional group housing
Okay.
facilities in.
Okay, and Wes would like to take the transitional group housing,
Since it's addressed elsewhere.
right?
Well, yeah, that's the
Okay.
problem, we're gonna have a conflict. If we go with Devers, we're gonna have a conflict between one that says 1 mile in one place in the code and
Well,
10
it's not so
miles
much
in
a
another.
conflict as it is
No,
who gets there first.
yeah, this isn't, they're both under
Yeah.
different
And
guidelines.
it's defensible to have what we have written. I think we'll win if we go to court, is my guess. But it really is a local call as to whether you want to allow some of these things to kind of be close to each other or not.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, can I digress for a
yeah,
moment? Just
sure.
with a question, and that is, what's the definition of transitional group housing? And by that, I mean, they're not all, the tenants, their residents are not all criminal.
By any
No.
means.
No, not all, but some could be, yeah.
They're just,
And
Well,
partly,
I
partly to
think-
keep the criminals away from the non-criminals.
Right, but you have, I think you have to define it, maybe it's slightly different, is my understanding of transitional group housing
pulling
is
it up.
those are individuals who may have been in prison at some time, but they are not actively part of the sentencing process. I mean, they have.
I would start it, just flip it around.
Okay,
It's people are down on their luck. They may, emphasis may,
Right.
have had some criminal background.
right.
And that could be causing part of their down on their luck. If they
But
just
when
got
you
out
read the
of prison.
definition, it's a lot different than there. It includes disabled, it includes indigent,
Right,
So Madeline, what is your,
Or even
we keep it
abused.
as is with a 10-mile distance? Or do we at the end of the reentry facility, parentheses, halfway house, end it right there? So you're basically separating transitional housing from reentry facility.
I think in the spirit of what transitional housing is meant to be, yes, there are maybe some people that have run-ins with the law, but I think it needs to be dropped from this.
Okay. So you're supporting Wes's,
Yes.
okay. Barry?
Yes.
Okay.
That's pretty much what it says.
John?
I agree.
Okay, so we have,
We have a lone wolf today.
so what we're gonna do is drop, we're gonna put reentry facility,
I get it.
parentheses, Pat, halfway house, to be consistent.
Yeah, I got that.
And then we're gonna truncate and delete the or transitional group housing and put 10 miles to it.
Does the term halfway house have a specific state definition? Or did
No,
we
we'll
just,
have to look.
or are we defining it as that?
Like I said, it's defined like you said right here.
Yeah, I think it becomes this, under this code.
And I don't think we should mix up the two terms.
Right, yeah, they're not similar
They're not the
uses.
same.
They don't typically have similar people.
Yeah.
Right, they are different purposes,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, where are we? H.
Before we go on to that, though, if they are distinctly different, then here they're lumped together because of the parenthetical insertion.
No,
Halfway house
That's all I'm
and-
asking, are they really synonymous?
So my understanding about a halfway house is that the residents that go there are generally parolees, and they're given like 30 days to get a job. And if they don't succeed in 30 days, then they're not allowed to stay. Now, I don't know if 30 days is always the time limit. So I do think there is a difference in what their purposes are.
Well, and the other centers are all called reentry facilities, or community reentry centers. So-
And they are active inmates.
So should
that-
it just, should this just be reentry facilities and not have the halfway house?
Yeah,
Unless
I
there's a
think they're
definition
separate.
somewhere.
I think you limit yourself unnecessarily. The term halfway house actually came from the Dallas Code because it's been in planning term of art for at least 80 years that I know of. And before there were reentry facilities, there were halfway houses. In my view, halfway house is the broader term, reentry has narrowed it down
Got it.
some, so there's a usefulness to having both.
And if you look at the definitions on the next page that Pat had,
Right.
the halfway house is defined as, see
Right.
definition of the reentry facility. So when we change the reentry facility definition, to be more consistent with what the state did, it's, people will see it's the same thing. We're calling it the same thing. Okay, thanks, David. All right, back to H, alcohol, that's narcotics, and everything else. So Pat, this was just intended to say that,
Yeah, I mean, I'd almost take it out because that's what prisons do anymore. I mean,
Okay.
that's
I mean,
normal.
it's incidental.
Yeah, customary and incidental to pretty much any correctional facility.
So
Okay.
in that way, it goes without saying.
Yeah.
so is everybody okay with just deleting it? Less code is always better. Okay, so we'll delete H.
Can we go back just for 1 second on the, so
Which one?
did you say
Which one?
they,
H,
well, it wasn't even,
Okay.
yeah, G, I guess, G. So David, are you saying that we parenthesizing halfway houses with reentry facilities is appropriate?
Yes, because
Okay.
it makes it clear that this sort of thing has been going on around the country forever.
And if you look at the second page, it's proposed that halfway house would just be cross-referenced to reentry facility.
Right.
It's a certain
So they're
definition.
synonymous. So actually, having the parentheses there in G is kind of superfluous as far as I'm concerned.
okay, because it's the same definition.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
and I just use reentry facility throughout the rest of it.
Okay,
But drop it or something?
yeah,
I wonder
It's
why
the
the
same.
state doesn't use that for these facilities.
Other than that, you'd have to drop it up at the heading too,
Right,
top of the page.
yeah.
Pat, did you hear that?
Yeah, I did.
I'm just gonna say, I'd be inclined just to leave it in the heading, but then just use your reentry facility throughout the section.
With the logic.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's kind of an explanation too, but, because they're cross-referencing the definitions.
Get it in the definition, and people around the country who have been dealing with this for a long time are used to seeing it called halfway house. They could come to our code, see it defined parenthetically, and say, oh, in Idaho, in Kootenai County, they're just calling it a reentry facility. It's the same sort of thing I've dealt with in New York, it's at Los Angeles, pick a place.
So on G, we're just gonna say 10 miles and end it with a period following facility after reentry facility.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what I would propose.
All right. We're deleting H. I just talks about complying with the county, state, federal codes. So that's a given pretty much too, I'm assuming. Everybody, any questions on I?
There is a usefulness to keeping some givens, which is that when we write a conditional use permit or a procedure, we can reference that the staff's going to be looking for those approvals before we issue ours.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, what does that mean? What did we just do?
We just kept I as is.
Thank you.
I had a question on J, Pat and David, is there's no signs allowed to say this is where it is?
That's what this says.
Yeah,
I think you need, Amy, what kind of signs did they have in the other facilities? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so they usually say, if it is the Idaho Department of Corrections that runs it, they have a sign that says Idaho Department of Corrections Reentry Facility.
Okay.
It's not very big, usually it's on a monument type sign.
Would this,
I could say except as authorized by the Idaho Department of Corrections.
That'd be an easy out.
okay.
So by prohibited, what are you trying to avoid?
I wondered about that too.
Drawing undue attention to the facility.
Okay, all right.
So we're going to add on to the end of it, except as permitted by,
Idaho Department of Corrections.
I don't think any of those other facilities have signs.
I thought you just said they all
They,
did.
yeah.
all
They do?
before.
they
Oh,
must
okay, I don't
have, they
remember
must have a
Sorry,
pretty
there's
small
usually like a
sign.
monument
Yeah,
sign.
because I don't remember seeing any, not in these pictures, but some others.
Yeah, they don't, it's not like they have flashing neon signs advertising the
Yeah.
fact that some.
Yeah, then you'll see the flags,
Then are we
state
dropping-
flags.
That's to answer the question, that's why Jay was in here.
Just enough to identify it.
Just, yeah, but if you had what Pat said, you're covered, so.
Pat, Wes had a question on, would we drop halfway house out of that too?
Makes
Be
sense.
consistent? So signs,
Well, I just, I'll figure it out, I could, you could just say, signs identifying the use of the facility shall be only as authorized by.
Okay.
Take out reentry and.
Yeah. Okay, so you'll modify it somewhat?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, everybody okay with that? We'll get the final to look at when Pat does it. Has to be maintained good conditions all the time. That's just a normal thing that we want to make sure to give them an opportunity. Gotta upkeep it. Anybody have a problem with K? Okay, L.
I have a question for Amy. On the form in reentry facilities in the southern part of the state, when I get to the second line, it says services to be provided on site. In those facilities, do you know, are they retraining facilities? Are they, what services are they offering besides
So yeah,
housing?
I have a slide for that as well. Thought I had a slide that showed the services. I did, I took it out. I'm sorry. So
Well, the question came up last time, are they retraining them on site, or are they incorporating them within the community
I
as
think
part of?
it depends on the facility. As far as these reentry centers, it is work in the community, but there are, I mean, they could be working probably on a computer too, job-wise, taking classes inside, things like that. Because they do offer group, they do.
You would think that'd be incidental to the use.
Exactly, yeah. Substance abuse, psyche, therapy,
Right.
they do have education, church, things like that.
What other comments do we have on L?
On L.
L.
Oh. Let's see, hang on one second.
Pat,
Security plan and also addresses transportation of residents, okay. So,
Um,
as I said, the inmates transport each other around, I don't know if that's an issue.
well, they would have to submit a narrative of what they're gonna do, so that'll be evaluation, I think, right,
Mhm.
during the process?
Yeah.
Right.
I do have a question, Pat, Dave, on, a compliance report must be submitted to director every 2 years after the signing of the order of decision granting permit. My question is, would we want, once it's built, to have it be a 1 year for the first year after
Oh,
it's in
and then
operation?
2 every year.
Before you wait 2 years to get a compliance report? I think, I would like to maybe propose saying after the first year in operation, they would give a compliance report, and then subsequent to that, it would be,
2 years.
if the report is acceptable,
Okay,
it'll be every 2 years.
yeah, sure.
And if they don't, if they're not acceptable reports, then they'd go on a yearly basis again.
So how was that last sentence?
Well, that's what you usually figure out for me, Wes. I think Pat's working on something.
I just put initial report 1 year, subsequent reports 2 years, if that's the,
Yeah,
Right,
if the
if
commission.
the first year
concurs.
passes muster. Right.
other questions on L, John?
Well, how is that, is it up to us to determine how that compliance report is developed, or who makes up a compliance
I
report?
would.
You do?
Mhm.
So I don't have any problems with it.
I'm sorry, John?
I have no problem with L.
Yeah, okay, Barry?
So I have a question of, when somebody makes the application, do they then, at the time of application, submit their plan for this security report?
Yes.
Plan for this
Uh-huh.
security, and that's what
Yeah, it says
the
right,
community can react to at that
right,
point?
yeah, right in its initial narrative,
Mhm.
and site plan is appropriate.
And that's why this is so important to have, because then it requires them to document their plans that could be evaluated by the county commissioners when they look at an application for approval or denial. It's something to look at.
Also, it ties it in later, performance.
Yeah, and you use the compliance report to see if they did what they said they were going to do. Okay, anything else on L?
So, just to be clear, the only modification we're making to L is the 1 year and
1
then 2
year.
year thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, M,
And just the site plan, and that's pretty standard for any CUP, it just incorporates at least the concept of the security measures, and, thinking about it more, there may be a reason that, IDOC may not want to,
Provide
disclose
those-
everything
yeah,
that they're doing for security, but at least kind of a concept.
yeah, I mean, and they may be able to provide an executive session to the county commissioners, things that they wouldn't do the general public if they wanted to. I'm assuming, right, Pat?
Yeah, to the extent that they'd be considering records that are exempt from disclosure of the Public Records Act, which is likely, that would be something that would be exempt.
Okay.
Yeah, this particular one, AM, is a cumulative sentence, that is, you want to have all of the important things listed. So the idea is if there anything missing.
Right.
Are you asking if it's another?
No, I'm not asking
Okay.
for it, I'm just saying, to review it, is there anything that's missing which is actually needed? Kind of like that sentence we created for the mining district.
Right.
Maybe if we put conceptual before security measures, that'd be my only suggestion.
Okay.
What is that again?
Conceptual.
The word conceptual
Well, I got
before
the word.
security measures,
So
just
why are you qualified? I just want to understand.
because, you know.
There's a limit to how far we can
IDOC's not-
push the
Yeah,
state.
IDOC's not gonna be,
I want to tell them everything.
yeah,
Right.
because, you know, because facility security is obviously so important with these things, they're probably not gonna, there's
don't-
things they're not gonna wanna tell the public.
We don't want them to
about their
telegraph.
security.
No, I get it. Thank you.
Um,
Is there any benefit on this, Pat, to Wes's point, to put at the end of the sentence, or requested by the county? So you're basically saying, here's what we're asking for, but when we actually get the,
Oh,
we may
As
say,
may be
we
requested.
may be requested by the county, that
Or
could
such
be
other-
cover,
Not following the improvements.
yeah, following the improvements, or may be requested by the county. So David may
Such
look.
other improvements as requested by the county that do not compromise, would not compromise facility security or something like that.
Well, I'm just talking about just in general, what Wes was talking about is that we never, when you put a list of things, you always worry you're gonna miss something. So if we put something at the end of this says, or requested by
I
the
think-
county.
Well, I think other existing or proposed improvements, you know, is the catch-all. So I think that would be superfluous.
Except, Mr. Chair, except that this is kind of one, M is one way, this is what the proponent
Yeah.
submits to the county, and your suggestion about the end of the sentence is from the other direction.
Right, it's from the county. So I think, Pat, we'd like to give David the opportunity to ask for additional things.
How about more improvements requested by the county at the end of the existing sentence, or improvements requested by the county?
Well, anytime we have a CUP application or, you know, other permit application, if we think the site plan is inadequate, we go back to the planner
Okay.
goes back to the applicant and says, you know, we need to include this and that.
So it's standard operating procedure?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think, you know, I think the last two clauses are a sufficient catch-all.
Okay. We're getting close. And this came out of, I think, the transitional housing. It may have been in the Dallas too, is that we wanted the people to actually, as part of the application, before the hearing, to actually meet with the neighborhood and get their feedback before that number N, or letter N. Any
If you're gonna do it for transitional housing, you wanna do it for this too.
And I mean, it worked very well for transitional housing, actually, in a way.
Stopped it in dead
Stopped
tracks.
Well, I think money did more than anything. He
Oh, really?
did not have the money to do
Oh,
what he needed
okay.
to do.
Did
Yeah.
not know
He
that.
found out how much it was gonna cost him, and I think that helped.
Oh, okay, I did not know that, but anyway, is N okay with everybody, any concern?
Well, that's what he
That's
said.
not what I heard.
Okay, well, that's what he said.
I heard the opposite. They had all the money they need, all the support they need. They weren't going anywhere because that neighborhood hated them.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay, I read something on his site that said something
Well,
about
it
money.
doesn't matter. I don't know
No, it
the
doesn't
answer,
matter. Oh, the
but
state will have the money to do this.
Well,
Probably.
First of all, what this avoids is the perception of forcing this upon people. Secondly,
Yeah,
it sends out the message which says to the proponent, you better come up with a really good plan. In other words, this is not gonna be boilerplate that you just suddenly drop in by helicopter.
yeah,
So it alerts both, it creates fairness and it creates responsible proposals.
so in mileage wise, what is a neighborhood?
There isn't such a thing.
So, I mean, when you say
We make a judgment call based on good planning practice.
I'm sorry, you make a good judgment call based on?
Based on good planning practice. You can imagine parts of the county where a neighborhood's much bigger than another
Sure,
part.
sure, that's what I'm trying to figure out, you know, what would you consider mileage?
I would have to consider each case on its own merits.
Okay.
Or we strike the word neighborhood, just have a meeting.
I think you're unnecessarily worried. I can make a judgment call about what a neighborhood is.
And, you know, our notice process in itself has a definition of who gets noticed.
This happens pretty regularly when we do something.
Yeah.
Every time.
This
Every
would
time,
be,
so it's nothing
this
new.
would be
Right.
within 1,000 feet of the facility, that'd be high impact use.
Right.
Yeah, so I was assuming that whatever our normal notice process would be, that would be it, pretty much. You could always expand it, but it'd be the minimum would be whatever our notice requirements are.
Right.
Yeah, that's be the minimum.
I
Yes.
I have a question, and I don't know where this would belong if we put it in. But since these facilities are totally dependent on jobs in the community, the one thing we don't want happening is to have the state come in, build a facility, it meets all the requirements, and then the jobs, the employment portion of the community says, we're not employing these people. Should there not be some requirement for a study of the
Sort of like a market study.
a market study that says, yes, we have enough employers in this community who are willing to employ this element of the population?
And I asked
Because
the
if it's
director
not-
that question, has he done any kind of economic or feasibility study? He said no.
Well, I think that should be done before the
As a
facility comes in,
prerequisite,
as a
kind of like the
prerequisite.
neighborhood meeting.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, if this facility is not, if this community is not gonna come together to employ these people, then putting a facility here is a disaster waiting to happen.
Does that get added to L, the narrative? Can you add that?
I think that might be actually just a separate line item.
Okay,
I can tell you, Chairman, that the state looks at this by unemployment. That's why they're looking at it here, or under G.8 or something like that.
mhm.
Well,
So
he told,
they know that there's jobs available
Right.
by that. It's from labor,
Yeah.
and that's what they look at.
yeah, he told me that it's population and base, and that means that one area would have obviously more jobs available than others.
How do we,
Availability
That's probably
of
why they're
jobs
looking
and-
here.
and
Yeah,
the
exactly.
ability to hire
Yeah,
is another
exactly.
thing.
how can you add a number, you know, add a line in there as a separate line about the market impact? You just say we'd like to have it.
An economic
Is it
or
economic?
or feasibility study,
Job study analysis.
job study or something, yeah.
Employment feasibility.
Yeah, employment feasibility, yeah. Well, but also, you know, housing, are they gonna be able to afford housing?
But that's after they leave here.
Sure, I know.
Right, I
It's
mean-
gonna affect the community.
So half that might go as an M, new M, and then M might become an N, because it tri-sequence is best that way.
Right.
And then the N becomes whatever.
Wes, can you repeat that
Just like
again?
Wes does a good job of figuring it out. He's making a new letter.
Yeah, I've got it.
You got some, you got.
Yeah, because, I mean, I'm gonna be re-lettering these.
Because you have to, you deleted one
anyway,
anyway.
so-
Okay, so we've added a job study or whatever you're gonna
So
call it.
that O&P statement.
So would that would include surveying potential employers and saying, hey, would you hire these guys, Pat?
It could, I mean,
I think what we,
It should,
I think
yes.
what we want is a study that would show the suitability of the business community to support this
Sure.
type of facility,
Yeah.
whatever that means.
Well, I know a survey was taken, and the result was 70% of employers, and I'm not saying it was here in Kootenai County, 70% employers said they would not hire parolees, so I think
but
that is,
if that's, I mean, 30% would still be quite a few jobs.
yeah, but it's something worth
And that's, I
yeah.
think
That's what we'd
what
like.
Madeline was asking for would exactly get to that point. is
Sure, exactly.
That And, again, they just gotta provide us the information that will be evaluated during the application process.
Yeah, I mean,
And
you
if the
can
30
include housing and wages and that kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
And if the 30% required a degree in physics, then.
Well,
That won't be in the
Well, and
30%.
I also,
Exactly.
and there's, they do have a minimum wage amount that the inmates, are allowed to work for, which is, well, it was when I talked to him, it was $12 an hour, so they're not gonna be able to go out and just take $8
Well,
an hour
again-
jobs, which I doubt there are any more around here.
well, I think what this really is, if they did a study today, I suspect it would not be a problem. This is not when the problem would be is if it was 2008 again.
Yep.
Okay, and so I think this is, they're gonna be responsible for finding jobs for these people, for the people who go to the center. I mean,
Or
that's.
6 months from now.
It is too.
Well, we all may be, we all may be together for 14 days now, so don't worry about it. Okay,
I'm still pretty good.
so Pat's gonna add another, letter, and we'll review the actual language when we get the, final draft.
Well, the next draft, it
The
won't be
next
the
draft.
final draft.
Yeah, thank you, Pat, you're right about that.
Yeah, I'm optimistic.
It's an iterative process.
I'm always optimistic. Okay, O is basically a reentry facility will be granted for 5 years, and then every 5 years they can get it renewed. And I think, is 5 years our common?
Well, it is for, high intensity uses like asphalt or concrete batch plants, et cetera. I had just put a note on my own that said, should it be a shorter period for the initial permit? We kind of went over this with the compliance
Yeah.
report.
Yeah,
Maybe it should track with the compliance. report.
And that's why 5 years isn't highlighted, because
Yeah.
should it be a shorter or longer period or what?
I'll go this way, so John's not first. Yeah, but what do you think about should it be for the first renewal, should be in 3 years or whatever, and then 5 years subsequent to that, or 5 years and
Well, if the renewal will allow us to identify potential issues or problems that need to be corrected, then I would encourage, yes, a shorter initial period.
the,
for
I would hope the compliance report would be the area that would
Yeah,
help us
see, that's
also
what I'm not
improve.
sure which,
Yeah.
if that would cover that, then, then maybe we don't need a shorter
Okay.
period here. Let David help us with that.
What's your thought, David?
Well, just think it through for a minute. If the compliance report comes about and we don't agree, they're not cutting the mustard, then usually we repeal the CUP, and it goes away.
So the 5 years is really, if everything's going okay, 5 years is
Right.
gonna be
As long as
okay.
they're meeting the
Right.
compliance.
Right, and if they're not making
Well,
compliance,
And
then,
the compliance, usually, if they're not cutting the mustard and we say as much, that usually gets their attention because they don't want to lose their CUP.
Right, so that's, I guess, kind of like, if we got it covered in that
Yeah.
one area, we don't necessarily.
so 5 years may be okay,
Mhm.
okay?
I guess so, because
Yeah.
David has it covered with the
Yeah.
compliance.
Okay, John, 5?
I think 5, I would consider going longer, but because of that reason right there, but I'm fine with 5.
Okay, Barry?
And I go back to the same thing, other conditional use permits are around that same time period.
For these-
So
for
they're
high intensity
consistent.
things,
So they're
right.
consistent, so it's not fine.
And Madeline? Okay. And then the last one, I thought last time we talked, Pat, you weren't gonna ask for a performance bond.
Yeah, I put the question there, do we really want to make the state put up a bond? I think
I
the
don't.
state's full faith and credit is probably sufficient,
Right.
so I would recommend striking it.
Okay, everybody okay with striking the,
Well, are we going to get some of these that aren't to stay?
There are what?
Or anything like this, it's not to stay?
Well, I mean, well, I don't think so, David, because
Okay.
Because these are active inmates, and I don't know that.
No other
private
group has
entities Could take, could take care of, take this over with
Yeah,
active
I
inmates.
think normally the privately run ones fall under that age threshold.
Okay.
Yeah, where they're on parole or
Yeah.
probation already, they've already been released.
Well, the only
Okay.
hitch is if there's a misconstruing of the term halfway house. I mean, it's pretty clear to me that reentry facility means what it means. But halfway house may be nebulous.
See, but
Well,
a halfway
it's
house
okay.
by definition is gonna be a reentry center.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think they're the same.
But we're making it the same.
Yeah, we're making it the same.
I know, I know.
I agree that. in
Yeah, I
people's
see a
mind, they-
difference, but that's me.
See, because if you don't, if you, the state may be fine, right?
Right,
Make sure you send in your taxes. The state may be fine. But if it's construed to be a private facility, then you probably want bonding.
Well, see, there's nothing, if we kept it in there, it does no harm, because it doesn't say we will. We must.
Right.
It's may.
Yeah, I
So
think
the
that's
board
fine.
may require,
Okay.
and you, during the application process, you would basically say this, you're not gonna get it from the state.
Or you could just have precatory language that says, you know, if the facility is to be owned or operated by,
Other than,
you know, an entity other than the state of Idaho.
Okay, you wanna do that then?
Yeah.
So we'll put something as a caveat that if it's not a state-run, we're
That
gonna,
works.
we're gonna require, it. we may require
that
it,
works. Yeah,
okay?
okay.
I know, Pat, with that safe passages, you know, run by the federal government, I wonder if we need to even add federal.
No, federal
No.
government is outside our jurisdiction.
We're preempted.
Oh,
Okay.
all right, now, Deborah, you brought this up initially, that the definition of a reentry facility is not people on probation or
Well,
parole. So we
yeah,
need to go and look back at what this is. What it said near on the state, it said like near people that were on, nearing release from prison.
He told me 18 months. It will serve people on probation and parole. They will come and go during the day, like to get job assistance or maybe psychiatric assistance from a therapist or something. But the residents actually living there will be active inmates
Okay.
with up to 18 months left to serve. I mean, they may show up there with 18 months and a year later, they've only got 6 months left.
Right.
Well, could then it say it's a facility for the housing of, and then say active inmates and the rehabilitation training of persons on probation, parole, or early,
Yeah.
whatever.
We'll have to change the definition of reentry facility to mesh with the state's mission and purpose.
Yeah.
But that's easy enough to do.
Mhm.
But I think the idea is of cross-referencing the two terms, even if conceptually people don't think they're exactly the same thing, is to regulate, is for regulatory purposes, that these,
Right.
you know, halfway house type of facilities will be regulated as a reentry facility.
Thank you. I
So
think
you-
that's
so
important.
you'll- oh,
I
sorry.
think that's important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you'll draft using the state's definitions, or-
Yes.
and then you'll put it in.
Yeah, which I
Yeah.
actually pulled up.
Because otherwise, things slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so Pat, if in a halfway house, the residents can come and go freely in the community,
Yeah.
but in a reentry facility, they cannot do that. They have to be under some kind of supervision. That doesn't make a
But they have the same kinds of impacts on a community.
It's raising,
Yeah.
it's raising the level of regulation on the less regulated use, essentially.
Okay,
Halfway houses right now aren't caught by anything,
Yeah.
or by us,
yeah,
but they should be.
If they
Yes,
house 9
yeah.
or more people.
yeah, okay, I understand that.
All right, so what we have is reviewed this document.
Nice red marked up.
Right, Pat will go
Sounds a
and
good review.
revise it based on what we have agreed to or discussed, and send it, and we'll send it out for another review. My
Like I
question,
said, it's an iterative process.
right, my question is really now, what, I'd like to just try to get some workshops on the books so that we could, bring this back as well as some other topics. So is everybody available on the next 2 Thursdays, on March 19th and March 26th? So what is, can I ask Sandy to try to check out the rooms for March 19th and March 26th and at least, yes, John?
I'm likely not here on the 26th.
Okay,
I probably won't be either, to be honest.
okay, so how about the 19th? And I don't know what after the 26th, what's in April? April 2nd. How's people's availability on March 19th and April 2nd? Barry, you're looking, not sure?
I'll have to check the April 19th fine.
Okay,
David, I pretty much don't schedule anything on Thursdays
Yeah.
at all.
okay. So why don't we, for the moment, put on our calendars March 19th and April 2nd at 1 o'clock. What we'll do at the March 19th, I hope, Pat, is be able to look at the Reentry Center again, okay?
Sure.
And then we also want to continue our discussion of Idaho statute, Title 67, Chapter 65, John. We got to continue that discussion on that. And then we have the dashboard discussion, which we've sent you documents on that. So I'll work with Sandy on the agenda for the 19th and the 2nd. The only other question for Pat and David is, what is your timeline for getting this out for public hearing? We were talking about May. Is that a realistic time?
I think so.
Yeah, sure.
So everybody, let's for the moment, we still have to approve it and all that kind of stuff, but why don't we just say that the what date is it? May 28th will be a public hearing,
Probably won't be there.
preliminary, okay, preliminary public hearing date. Just put it on your calendar. That's a 6 o'clock appointment. All this will be in the minutes anyway on that. We're almost out of time, and Pat, I don't know if you wanted to address one issue, or you want to defer it?
I'll actually defer for the time being.
Okay, okay.
Ask you a question.
Yes,
This is maybe not going to actually take place, but we have this thing that's just happening throughout the country in terms of large group gatherings, which I guarantee you this will be a large group gathering. They just shut down the University of Oregon, shut down Oregon State University. It's not to alert anybody to, run up the flag and jump off the ship, but we gotta think about this. And the second thing is, Dave and I worked pretty rigorously on that dashboard definition and giving you samples. I don't know if you read it or not. Was it fairly straightforward to you how to review those?
We'll still be confused as we go along, but we'll have you guys.
So
Well,
there's slippage.
yeah. We're gonna have to, that's why we want to discuss it before you do any work on that. That'll be on one of the agendas. One of the things I talked to Sandy, I asked Sandy before the meeting was about that very issue of, has the county talked about limiting public hearings for the foreseeable future? Now, May is a little while out.
You see a direction.
Yeah, and so I think what we would do is, the county will make its own decision on what to do and that. But I think that if we need to move it, we do, but if we shoot for the 26th of May, then at least we'll have the work done and the public will be able to get their feedback into us. But it may be necessary to go and move it to a different day. Yeah, Deborah?
26th or 28th, I wrote down.
28th, I'm sorry, Deborah. Thank you, 28th.
We canceled March Madness.
I know, it.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, this is 2.5 months from now.
Well,
The weather will be warming up, and
Yeah.
hopefully that
Well,
virus will be dying off.
Duke in
Yeah,
Kansas, the reason,
supposedly
you know why
it's
that
all
happened,
rain and
well,
shine.
part of the reason
Yeah.
is Duke in Kansas basically
That's what
shut
they
down
say.
their athletic programs.
Yeah,
So,
several other ones have.
yeah,
Now, if
so,
you want to make a plane trip somewhere, now's the time. to
right,
do it.
Yeah.
but I do think it's important to, the public safety is the number one thing we're concerned about. Barry?
Sorry, I'm going back to your dashboard
Uh-huh.
definitions. And the only one that I still have needs some clarification, I should say, is the deferred policy. So I think I understand why you're classifying it as such, but
Why not combine the third and the second?
No, I'm just saying, why is, we're deferring it to what, who, I mean, how are we doing that for us?
Oh, no,
Define
these
that.
are things that have been deferred.
These are things that happen?
Yeah, we've talked about these in the past and didn't deal with it.
Okay, that's the clarification.
Okay.
I didn't know why we were calling them.
That's why,
So they're already stipulated
Right.
that way?
yes.
That's fine.
Or, somehow I'm a little confused. What are you saying? Oh, category 2?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
those categories and examples too. I didn't understand why it was deferred, but now I understand.
Well, there's also something about the verb, the lead-off verb. For example, if you go down in the third category, with determine, it gives you a specific thing to do.
Yeah, it's obviously an action,
Determine,
I got that, yeah.
But there are some fuzzy areas.
That's why I was looking at this, because it's remedy,
Yeah.
remedy's still an action, so I don't know
Yeah.
how else to look at it. That's why I was confused until.
And I will tell you, Barry, that when Wes and I have been working on this, that we've been playing around with this and we talk to each other, and when you get into all these policies, you can go and make an argument for different things. And what we're really trying to do is, the stuff that is really actionable and important to get done, let's just go, and if we have to, move back and forth, but it's gonna be an interesting discussion before we actually review all, I don't know how many policies we actually have out there. Does anybody else have anything else? I definitely appreciate everybody's participation and recommendations. I think we get a lot of changes, which is good. I think John's gonna go and say something now.
Well, I do, you asked if anybody had something, and I debated, because it's already, we're on overtime, but, you know, in our comp plan rewrite, it was suggested that we have a policy that addresses new technology,
Right.
and it is our mission to protect the safety and health and general welfare. Does anybody know anything about 5G, and is that something that we should be thinking about as far as a comp plan policy goes? That's not, I'm not asking for a discussion. What I mean to ask for is, should we put that on the agenda, on some future agenda?
About technology?
It's coming, I
Yeah.
don't know that we can stop it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it can be discussed. I think there was a provision in the comp plan update that addressed, just generally addressed, new and emerging
Staying on top
technology,
of it.
and that was-
Right.
Right, so I guess what I'm saying is, in light of that policy, should we
Consider
put on
the
agenda
impacts,
some discussion of 5G?
Doesn't hurt.
Well, we get to the code, which would be where you actually embed it. Then probably education would be important.
Yeah,
Just
well,
county application.
we could discuss whether we need a code amendment to accommodate.
Yeah.
And it'll be-
Given
yeah.
the way that the 5G infrastructure is radically different from 4G prior.
Well, at least for me, I can't speak for everyone else in the room. I'd probably need somebody who's knowledgeable about what, I've heard about 5G, but I don't necessarily understand what it's gonna mean to counties, websites, and other things, and what it means to me personally, I don't necessarily know. So for that meeting, we may need help from community development to get some experts in to go and say, this is what it means, and then that'll at least let us understand how it may impact our land use code.
That's kind of what I'm suggesting.
I will put this in the minutes as a, we're working with Sandy on the minutes to go and put this in, John, as a future topic for the agenda, so we don't lose it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Thank you, everybody, and the meeting is adjourned at
3:03.
3:03.